Do you wonder what runs through the mind of the CEO of your favorite company? Have you ever looked at an organization or an association or a big brand and questioned some of the decisions they made and thought to yourself, what is the person in charge thinking? Well, I've got the guy who can answer those questions for us today. My guest today is 𝐤𝐨𝐳𝐝, and he's the CEO Confidant. He gets inside the minds of CEOs, and he monkeys around and fixes them up. Actually, Angel is known as the CEO Confidant because he can help them make better decisions, he can help them be more productive, and he can really help a lot of them probably from going crazy. You see, Angel's an influencer, he's a LinkedIn strategist, he's an international TV host, a public speaker, and he's a board member and philanthropist. And in the last 21 years, he's empowered more than 1,500 CEOs in 33 different countries. He was born in Barcelona, and he has lived in 8 countries, speaks 5 languages. Established entrepreneurs and corporate CEOs hire Angel to bridge the gap globally for expansion and exposure. He sits on the board of the Evolutionary Business Council, an organization with more than 350 global transformational leaders with a combined reach of well over 6 million people. He's based in Texas, and in early 2017, he launched his international foundation called Wisdom for Kids, and he's helped more than 1,000 underprivileged kids in Latin America become entrepreneurs using their local resources. My friends, please join me in welcoming 𝐤𝐨𝐳𝐝 to the Inside BS show. Angel, welcome to the show, and thanks for all the great work you're doing for kids. I mean, that is really amazing, helping 1,000 kids be entrepreneurs. That's fantastic.
Thank you very much for such a nice introduction. And obviously, thank you everybody who's listening to us today.
Well, it's great to have you. Tell us about how you got into, you're the CEO Confidant. You're the guy who the CEOs depend on to give them the straight truth, right? How did you start doing that? Did you wake up one day when you were a child and say, I want to help CEOs be more successful? How did you get started?
Well, to your question, when I was in high school, I wanted to be a computer engineer, and after the second semester in college, I realized that was not me. It was definitely not me. So, actually, by practice, I mean, in the 90s, I left Spain for good, and I went to live into the UK. That was one of the countries I lived in, and I started literally my sales career. So, I started to make a lot of phone calls every single day, trying to get appointments for my field sales reps. That was my starting point, to be honest. And then, you know what? My field reps loved me because I was getting appointments to CEOs. So that was the starting point. And I started to do that from the UK for Spanish accounts. And then I went to Portugal, and then to France, and then to Germany, and then to the Nordic countries. And it's funny because I was calling those countries without knowing their actual language, but I was still able to conduct business there and get business there and conduct, and set appointments for my field reps. So the answer to your question is making literally thousands and thousands of calls, trying to deal with the gatekeepers and reaching out to them and convincing them that it would be worth their time to meet with someone face to face in order to discuss what would be the best way to accelerate the growth of their business. That's how I started.
Yeah. What's the secret to getting an appointment with a CEO? What did you discover through all those calls? What's the secret? What are the 1 or 2 things that people need to know to get the CEO either on the phone or to get in front of the CEO?
Number one, there's always going to be a gatekeeper, right? So the number one, I mean, maybe the shortcut would be call on a Friday afternoon, and maybe you could get the direct line, or the CEO is going to take the call, which has happened to me many times. But number one, there's going to be a gatekeeper. So always try to be yourself. Don't try to be anybody else. Be yourself. Be human. Be just who you are. Don't pretend to be anybody else. The only thing that you have to show is that you are yourself, and you genuinely want to talk to someone. In this case, probably the boss or the peer of that person that you're talking to, and tell them, that's why I would like to do it. Something that has actually helped me a lot is always to relate that first conversation with gatekeeper, and that's kind of advice number 2, is to relate that conversation to something that's happening in that very moment. So obviously I Google that person, I Google that company, I know what's going on, I know what's the last thing that happened in that company, and then I relate my conversation with that gatekeeper to that conversation. I know that this just has happened now, that this is why I'm reaching out to this CEO, right? And it's happening this right now. And I think that, we can have, or we might eventually be able to help you with this specific goal or this specific issue that you have or this specific acquisition that you just did. To be honest, I mean, we always try to pretend so much. It's like when we are writing an email, right? We overthink it like 10 times, or we use someone else's recipe, that template, that swipe file. It's gonna be, it's the magic bullet, that doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Really, honestly. So the best thing I would do if I were you, I mean, anybody listening to us, just do it a lot. Do it as many times as you can. And just, don't put yourself in a place in which you are measuring how many, oh my God, how many calls do I have to make? No. Do not measure the success. Measure the failure. Measure how many, calls where you actually hang up onto. Measure the failure, so you make it a goal, to lower the number of calls that you were rejected. I think that's a good way to do it, mentally speaking, because it takes a stamina, right?
Yeah. Well, talk about now your business is you talk to a lot of CEOs, and when you talk to CEOs, how many times have they worked with someone who that was referred to them or someone who was connected to them? Because there's a very high trust barrier, right? So in your business, how do you get most of your clients? I would imagine people pass you from one place to another because, Angel Rebo, he really helped me a lot. You got to call Angel. How easy is it once you have success with one CEO to get them to refer you to somebody else? That's my question.
Well, it's as easy as, a CEO, trusts someone who is a trusted advisor of that person, right? So that's the easy answer. Everybody does their own due diligence because we are talking about something. I mean, bottom line, Dave, we are all human beings. Mm-hmm. We all go through different kinds of, we all have our limiting beliefs. We all have, those things that we would like to fix. Regardless of where you are, regardless of the company that you run, it doesn't matter. We are still human beings and we still face challenges in our lives. And as far as we are open enough, and talking about the CEOs, open enough to get a piece of advice from an external, source and an additional, let's say, an external set of eyes to look into our lives, that's going to work out. So is it difficult to get to a CEO? It is. Is it easier to get to these people when you get a referral? Obviously it is, but they still are going to do their own due diligence, and they still are going to test you, and they still are going to look for references. And that's good because, again, it's like when you market something or you market a show, right? It's not for everybody. It's not for everybody. You really want to attract the people that you can really help. And I really mean it. I really, for instance, I like to talk a lot about, self-awareness, about mindset, about this, even about the spirituality and why, we are, spiritual beings having a physical experience, right? And not everybody resonates with that, and that's okay, and I still have clients who are believers and have different faiths and denominations, and that's all right. But you know what? We always find the common ground. We find the common ground. I really think that regardless of your position, you always want to do good in this world. There's no CEO out there that, regardless of their position or their position of power, wants to really do bad to anybody, nor employees, nor shareholders. So we really have much more common ground among us than what we might think. But you see, your question is it's so useful for everybody listening to us, because there's this mental trap, right? There's this cognitive trap that there's so much up there that it's impossible. It's so difficult to reach out to them. And just let me give you an example. 2 hours ago, I was sitting having lunch with the senior VP of a $500 million corporation. Okay, so he's in part of the leadership team, and oh my God, if you were there on our table, just to give you an example, he's the most amazing guy. You would like to go with him. We would go to church with him. You would go to for a beer with him. Again, it's all, we're all human beings, and
Yeah.
and actually I would even think, Dave, to be very honest, I think that right now for the last 12 months we've lost so much connection. We've lost, I'm going to repeat that, we've lost connection in such a broad way among us,
Yeah.
that having this connection back, and CEOs are not an exception, is huge. I was having this call face to face. I mean, I was having lunch with him, with this SVP, but it was like, wow. I mean, it was a great conversation. Like, it was the first time, but it was a great conversation. We really, get on well, and we spoke about families and everything. People really want to reconnect, and I think that's another piece of advice. Right now, when you're having conversations and you're trying to, get like convince gatekeepers, when you're trying to reach out C-level executives, just talk about reconnecting. Talk about reconnecting. Talk about, having a look at their businesses and their lives from a different set of eyes. Things have changed. The market has changed. There's a lot of things that have changed. Be you the one that's going to give an additional, external opinion about what's going on there.
Yeah, talk a little bit about how important it is for senior leadership. Whether it doesn't matter if it's an entrepreneurial business or a Fortune 500 company. Talk about how important it is for them to have someone that they can talk to on a personal level about the business, because every conversation they have is a conversation that includes a political calculation if it's inside their company. And if it's a conversation with someone outside of the company, every conversation they have in the back of their mind is, I'm wondering what this person is looking to gain by this interaction. So if they have a coach, if the CEO has a coach, tell folks how important it is that, you don't have an agenda. Your agenda is to help them be more successful so they can really feel comfortable and open up to you. Explain to folks that dynamic, please.
And not only what you just explained, but I think that it's important to remember that again, my experience has taught me so many times that in reality, obviously about that particular industry or business, they are probably going to know more than me, but that's not an issue. And also in reality, most of the answers they're looking for, they already have them inside of them. And that's the most important thing. The real value that they bring to the equation, besides my perspective, having helped so many companies and worked with so many companies in so many industries, is actually that I am able to ask questions. I'm able to ask the right questions or additional questions or questions that they didn't think that maybe they should ask themselves. And just to have that period of time, this space, this safe space to be themselves. So I can ask them those questions and we can jointly reflect about those answers and those questions. That's really powerful. I think, I've heard from Tony Robbins many times say that the quality of your life is the quality of the questions that you ask yourself. And I really think that's the case. Because the most powerful questions are the things that typically trigger the most profound changes. The most profound changes. And, obviously, one thing which is true is that obviously CEOs, and the larger the company is, probably, the largest the impact of their decisions is, right?
Yeah.
So, they're very busy. That's for sure. And besides making sure that they're right leaders for their organization, that, that when they delegate everything on the leadership team, or when they go and they present the results quarterly to their boards, they have a lot of responsibility, okay? It's a huge burden. It's like, it's like going to the principal's office, many times in many different ways, right? But again, who's going to give them that safe space? Who's going to give them that safe space in which they will be able to reflect on things that typically they don't have to? And that's really the power of us as coaches, really. I really think that that's the most important thing that we bring. And because, how can you possibly teach someone? And also, this is not only personally speaking. This is also about the business. Yeah. There's a lot of questions that you can ask about the business, about the culture, about engagement of their employees, about accountability of their employees, and to the leadership team. There's a lot of things that can be actually explored through asking the right, powerful questions.
Yeah, talk a little bit about how difficult is it to convince someone they need help, to convince someone they need that sounding board. many times over the years, when I went into a company or when someone called me on the phone, I wouldn't find out right away. I wouldn't find out probably until maybe even 6 months or 7 months into the engagement how they came to make a decision to bring a coach in. And a lot of times it's, if I had to pick the top 3 things, somebody on my board said, hey, have you ever thought about getting a coach? Or a peer. I was playing golf with my buddy who's, you know, a successful entrepreneur, and he said how great the advice he got from his coach was. So I thought I would explore it. You know, the third thing, believe it or not, and people are astonished when I say this to them, I get a lot of calls, and maybe you do too, from people who they don't know who to call, and they're just out doing research, or they're having somebody do research for them, and you're one of 3 people. They watched all their YouTube videos, and you're the person who they called first because they liked your style on YouTube. And these are people who they could hire anybody they want, right? Why is it so difficult for these people to just ask for help? Just call your buddy and say, hey, I need a coach. Do you know anybody? Why is it so hard for them to ask for help?
Well, I think because it's perceived, number one, because I think it's perceived sometimes like a weakness. And that happens to us also, Dave, as entrepreneurs. I mean, in the beginning, until, you know, we really make these big, massive failures and we have nowhere else to go, we tend to do everything ourselves. We are our sales, we are our marketing, we are our operations, we are our, you know, CPAs, we are everybody. So that's the first thing. Okay, the excuse is the time, but time is not really ever an excuse. And obviously, money is not an excuse either, right? So I think it's really like, you know, why should I be asking for help? Why should I be asking for help? But I definitely get those calls, the same kind of calls that you get, and I think it's good that they do that due diligence themselves, and they go online and they listen to those podcasts, those interviews, and they read your posts, and they really know what you are standing up for. Yeah. And I think it's important that they really know what kind of human being you are. So, you know, I think that's good. But at the same time, you know, as you know, there are millions of coaches. And, you know, how many are really, I don't remember any statistic from ICF, you know, the International Coaching Federation, but sure. Probably, I mean, a lot of people make money, but not a lot of people make a lot of money, right? Yeah. So that's probably the case. So I think that more and more people are looking for help, but maybe the question is also, are we doing the right marketing? Are we as coaches doing the right marketing? Are we positioning ourselves the right way to attract the right people? You know, something that is really funny that I see all the time, every time I meet face to face, like today with this SVP, with some C-level, every time I realize that they did a great job from a marketing perspective, because they are all like really like made with the same cookie cutter, in the sense that they have the same values. They are easygoing people. They people that really believe in specific principles. They really trust their families. They trust their friends. They have their own side businesses, or their wives have their own side businesses. So again, I would really ask myself, if that's the case and we are having issues trying to find the right person, is, are we positioning ourselves correctly? Are we niching? Okay, so are we being specific enough so that there's no doubt what kind of people we really want to help? We don't want to help as coaches everybody. Right. We feel comfortable, and it's okay to do it. It's okay to do it, to really, you know, help a specific kind of, you know, of CEO. And let me tell you an example. As you mentioned before, I'm very strong on, you know, philanthropy, and I have myself with my nonprofit help kids in Latin America. So I myself, every time I have a first meeting with a potential client, I always talk to them about, what would you like to do with your life? You know, how have you been contributing to this world so far? Right. You know, besides, obviously, I want to make sure that they really want to change. And I have obviously, the same as anybody else, I've had failures. I have failed with coaching clients. And the main reason why I have failed is because I took shortcuts. You know, instead of doing what I had to do, I said, no, this has been so well recommended by someone else that, you know what, this is not really needed. So I'm going to go to exactly do this. And when I don't do what I always do, and what I always do the best, if I don't do that, then there's a high likelihood that I'm going to fail. And that's okay, because at the end of the day, we are human beings and we learn from failures.
You said in that answer, you said so much. I think the first thing that really resonated with me is you shouldn't be out trying to, regardless of your business, you shouldn't be out trying to attract everyone. You should be trying to attract people who are just like your best clients. And when you, in the very beginning of our time together today, you mentioned, you mentioned spirituality, and you said, oh, that might turn some people off. That's okay, because they're not your client. That person, the person who gets turned off by that, that's not a client for you. That'll be a client for somebody else. There's so many clients out there. I realized a long time ago, from when I first started working with professionals, I was helping almost exclusively with sales and marketing, and I realized that the mission of my work was to help people both make a great living and live a great life, to make money and enable them to spend more time with their family, with their friends. And that mission led me to the realization that for that work, a solo professional who had no family, no friends, and was working until midnight every night and then would come back in at 6 in the morning, that wasn't a good client for me. And you know why that person wasn't a good client for me? Because we didn't have anything in common. I got a couple of kids, I got a couple of dogs, I love spending time with them, and I work so that I can do whatever I want with those people, with those dogs, whenever I want to do it, right? If that resonates with you, you're a great client for making money and living a great life. If that doesn't resonate with you, and if you want to make $10 million by working 300 hours, 150 hours a week, 200 hours a week, by, billing 2,500 hours a year, I'm not your guy. I'm not the person who can help you do that. It was like when I realized that, like a weight was lifted off of my shoulders. And I said to my wife, I'm never working with any of these people again.
Totally.
And it was so liberating. Talk to me about that. That's self-awareness. Talk to me about CEOs and self-awareness. I've found that the best CEOs know who they are, they know what their strengths are, and they leverage their strengths, and they surround themselves with people who can help with their weaknesses. What's your experience been?
Yes, and not only that, they keep on recruiting people that are much better than themselves, even if that looks like it's like you either live in. I mean, Dave, let's face it, you either live in a world of scarcity or in a world of abundance. It is what it is, So I think that most of the CEOs live in a world of abundance, and they keep on hiring the best team possible, and they are fully aware of the weaknesses. They're fully aware of the weaknesses, and they use their strengths to generate as much business as they can in their company. That would be like a nice summary of what you just explained. At the same time, talking about self-awareness, I think that in general, most of them put some time aside, like to have some me time to do things that otherwise we don't have time. Besides, dealing with the leadership team, and dealing with the most urgent things in their businesses. I think that they really set some time aside to do things that they don't have time, or just to self-reflect, and to see, and to see where their mind is at that point in time. I think that I remember it's not available anymore, but I remember an app in the App Store. There was an app which was a wonderful app. The only thing that the app did was you could program it so that every X amount of minutes, the app would ask you just this question: where would you like your attention to be right now? Where would you like your attention to be right now, right? And that was a great exercise. And so I think that the great leaders, actually, they do that. Where is your attention? Is your attention really what it should be? What is your priority? Are you really is your life, business life and personal life, both going around your priorities? And as you know, I did that all the time. I compromised my personal life, my family life, because of my, professional life many times, many years, until I decided to leave, corporate America a few years ago. But, that's also very often something that they are aware. Sure. They are aware. The CEOs are totally aware that, they're living probably some, kids, some kids activities, even if they're, old, they're leaving the family a little bit behind, and they're fully aware of that, and that's very often one of the reasons why they go to coaches is because, okay, so I've been very successful here, but I'm having those issues with the rest of my life. How can you help me fix those kinds of things? And that's why I think that what I do differently to other coaches is what really helps me.
Yeah, that's great. Talk about the people who the CEO surrounds him or herself with. How do they make sure they get those decisions right?
Well, obviously, there's no right or wrong, right? I mean, there's
good,
always
right for them.
Exactly.
We're talking about self-awareness and matching their weaknesses and being superseding them in certain areas. How do they make sure they do that the right way?
Yeah. So what I was trying to say is that, I understood your question. What I'm trying to say is that, let's say that every decision has there's ups and there's pros and there's cons. So what they're always doing inside their mind, as opposed to that, I think that they're always, seeing the pros and the cons of every single decision. Mm-hmm. How do they surround? I mean, as they are so aware of their weaknesses, they don't want to be going to the board, to meet with the board, to report results or whatever, and still having to face those weaknesses. So I think that they are very smart surrounding them with, first, a very strong leadership team, okay, very strong leadership team that's gonna help him balance his own weaknesses in whichever area it is. It can be finance, it can be sales, it can be marketing, whatever that is. That's one thing. And second, they also have these, external trusted advisors, these colleagues, these even peer groups. As you know, there's many organizations today that offer these peer groups in which you go, you meet with other, with other CEOs and you discuss, business, decisions, and then they help you do it. They all have external advisors. They all have trusted advisors. They all have, not all of them have peer groups, but I think that it's becoming more and more important.
Yeah.
And also something that comes from that I have started to see, and something that comes from the entrepreneurial world is masterminds. Masterminds. I think that there is an increasing number of CEOs that are starting to go to masterminds because they really believe that there's a lot of things that can be learned from those kind of groups.
Oh, that's interesting. And how do they organize? I can imagine, because I run a group myself for professionals, and we have some high level professionals in there, but generally professionals, because they feel like they're on, like entrepreneurs, they're on an island, right? They feel like they're by themselves, so they gravitate toward those groups. How does a CEO find a mastermind group where there's going to be people who are like his or her peers? You run a $600 million annual revenue company. There are other people who do that, but how do you stumble upon a group of them?
Yes, I mean there are many organizations that do that today. I mean, okay. It's relatively easy to find them. I don't want to say names, but I would say there's like 3 or 4 different groups of CEOs that they meet, or organizations that facilitate, and then they have leaders, they have chairs for those groups of CEOs.
Yeah.
So this is, if you go to LinkedIn, actually you will see that easily, and typically those CEO groups, they tend to also use a lot of advertising on LinkedIn, for instance. So that should be easy for them to find.
Yeah. All right, let's shift gears a little bit, and let's talk a little bit about the pandemic and the CEO's challenges beyond just the obvious challenges of keeping people healthy and making sure that employees and obviously customers, clients stay healthy. What are some of the big challenges you see for CEOs related to the pandemic right now?
Yeah, it's very clear. It's doing more with less. Obviously it hasn't affected every single industry the same way, right? So let's face it, there's industries whose revenues have gone down dramatically, and others that have kept alive, and others that have actually done great during this, circumstances or current state of affairs that we are living in the world. So besides that, the common answer is how to do more with less. And I'm not doing how to do the same with less. I'm saying how to do more with less. So I think that in general, everybody's more concerned about their profitability, not only about their bottom line. It's very easy to say, okay, so our revenues were down, but is it possible to increase the profitability of your company even though your revenues went down? And the answer is a big yes. Does everybody know how to do it? No, because we tend to think, and there's a lot of people out there that tend to think that, it's just, we have to cut costs. That's it. And what about culture? And what about employee engagement? And what about how can employee engagement? You talked about health, but obviously CEOs have also been very concerned about keeping the talent in their organizations, even in times in which maybe they couldn't pay them. They couldn't pay the talent properly.
Sure.
But that has been a number one concern. How do I keep the talent now that my revenues are going down? So I think that the most successful organizations, I've seen that, so that's why I'm sharing it with you, have actually really cared about improving employee engagement as a way to improve profitability in these times of hardship.
Yeah. And what are you seeing in terms of trends as far as work from home, and do the company's leaderships, are they embracing it? Do they feel threatened by it? Does it depend on the size of the company? How is the whole work from home situation impacting some of these decisions?
Yeah, I think large corporations, the largest corporations in the world, they have embraced fully work from home, and they will keep on working like that, definitely. Then for privately held companies, it really depends on the personality of the owner, president, or boards of directors, leaders, let's say. I think it really depends on them. If they are old school or new school, I think that everybody would like to really see their employees again and to have this real engagement, this really real physical engagement. But the reality, if you ask me, a lot of people, and you can talk to real estate companies, you can talk to commercial real estate companies, and you will see what's happening in the world. So probably what we are expecting is that the levels of occupancy of those large offices is gonna stay very low in the near future. I think that organizations are going to keep on working remotely, like massively. I'm not a good example in Dallas here in Texas, because I was reading actually a couple of weeks ago. I was reading a stat about the top 25 largest cities in America, and how many what's the percentage of employees going back to the office. I think that the country's average was 24-25%. The country's average, so all the cities average. Sure. But in Dallas was over 50%.
Yeah.
So probably it depends on where in the country, and it depends on which industry, but I definitely see that everybody's going to work more and more from home moving forward. And by the way, this is also having a side effect, which is there's a lot of salespeople that love to be traveling all the time, and there's some salespeople that are having to adapt to having to work and sell remotely. And not everybody is. When you used to go to the airports before on a Monday morning, how many salespeople will be going somewhere in the country or internationally to close some business, right?
Sure.
So right now, there's some level of also uncertainty there, in the sense that not everybody that was really good and comfortable selling face-to-face now are doing the same thing and are so comfortable selling remotely. So again, there's another trend there that I think is going to have, we should keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think you really have to be, I think you really have to understand what is important to your client, what is important to the person on the other side of the equation, because my experience has been with clients and everybody else that if you're, say, over 35 or you have a family, or you're over 35 and you have a family, you love working from home. In fact, you would love to work from home and have your kids in school so that it was nice and quiet during the day, and then the kids would come home from school and you could have time with them and you wouldn't have to be in a car traveling. If you're under 35, or if you're single, or if you don't have a family and you're dependent upon your occupation for your social life, this has been devastating for you. And you can't wait to get back in the office because talking about what's on TV or talking about something you saw on Instagram around the water cooler is your social life. So, there's really two extremes there. Now, what you said about salespeople, I think there's going to be a huge competitive advantage to people who can safely get in front of other people, because you mentioned it a few times, and I'm in 100% agreement with you. We need the face-to-face interaction. We want to be able to sit across from people and have a conversation with them. My clients are asking me, because I used to do an annual live event with my clients every year. They're asking me when I'm planning the next live event. And I said, if I planned it tomorrow, would you come? Oh, no, I wouldn't come tomorrow. But as soon as I get a vaccine, I would come. So, there's this magical time that's out there. As soon as everybody feels like we've hit that magical time, we have to be ready to meet the need of the people who want to be in person. And we also have to respect the fact that some people are just going to be comfortable being where they are. Myself, I traveled 122 days in 2019, and I traveled 7 in 2020. And I was thrilled to be working from home. At the beginning of the pandemic, of course, I was concerned about what's going on in the pandemic, but I was saying to myself, listen, if I can re-engineer this business so that I can work from home, I think it'll work out really nicely. Well, now that we're almost a year into it, I wouldn't mind traveling a little bit.
Same here, exactly. I mean, I remember the same as you, right? I remember one of my top years was like 215 flights in a year. Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of life that we probably, many of the people listening to us also today have had. But also, let me say something, because we as let's say as public figures, right? I mean, we talk to others every
Sure.
single day. We, also we have to be testimonials of what we stand up for. So, maybe we have to have 2 different kinds of events because
Sure.
there's people. It's like, I have a friend of mine who has her daughter, is a great gymnast, and she and her when you go see her competitions, there's like 40 girls all in there, doing gymnastics, and not everybody like protects themselves, as others might be,
Sure.
thinking about. But you know what? That is right now like a natural selection. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So all these families have accepted the reality that if they want to have their kids thrive, they have to compromise, right? And so I think that there's going to be some adjustment. I mean, honestly, I think that we're still adjusting.
Yeah.
And there's going to be an adjustment. And I think that, I obviously love to be on a stage, and I love to have people around me and teach them and, and coach them and whatever. And probably, but also I think that, we have to be respectful. And as public figures, we have to be, trying to do as much as we can for everybody that wants it.
Sure.
For everybody that wants it. So if we have to recategorize our clients or our clientele somehow, let's do it. We don't have to hold a certain type of client hostage because, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Let's try to help as public figures. Let's try to help. I mean, again, that's my take, right?
Yeah.
Let's try to help everybody while doing that. Let's live in a world in which we can do lots of things together, one way or another. As opposed to, oh, I cannot do this or I cannot do that. Let's try. The question is how, right? The question is how. It's not if, but how. How could we do it? How could we do this? How could we do that?
Yeah. Tell me a little bit about your foundation. What inspired you to start it, and tell me about the work that you do.
Yeah, what inspired me was definitely being so many years. I lived in Mexico for 10 years, and I worked in Latin America for almost 15 years. So I was always seeing, these kids every time I was going to a manufacturing plant to close some business with some CEO. Every single time there were all these kids outside those plants, trying to keep my car safe or trying to sell gums or candies or food or clean my windshield. You've seen this. I mean, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So I had seen that for so many years. And, there was this massive contrast in which the same day I would be meeting all those kids outside those plants, but then inside the plant, I would see these very powerful people dealing with multi-million-dollar budgets. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So that was really what was all the time like being ingrained in my brain. And one day, literally, I had what I call a spiritual experience in which suddenly I was in a place, and I started really literally crying and seeing all those images and all these kids in need and these powerful people and all those kids that needed someone. And the main question that actually bugged me a lot that day was, if I don't do it, who's going to do it? Who is better positioned than you, Angel, to do this? You tell me, if you don't do it, who's going to do it? Reality, the answer is easy. The answer is nobody's going to do it if you don't do it, Angel.
Sure.
So, that was the trigger that made me start Wisdom for Kids.
Great. So how can people find out more about Wisdom for Kids? How can people find out more about you and your coaching?
you.
Where can they go, and how can they find out more about it?
Thank you. Yes, so to know more about Wisdom for Kids, it's very easy. Go to wisdomforkids.today. Wisdomforkids.today.
Okay, we're going to put that. We'll put that in the show notes. I'm writing it down right now.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Wisdomforkids.today.
Okay.
And there you can donate, you can volunteer, and you will see my story. Actually, there's an interview on the front page, so you will see exactly how everything came about and what we do. And to know more about my business or myself, number one, I'm very active on LinkedIn, and you're also very active on LinkedIn. So we can, you can easily, everybody watching us today or listening to us today, you will see us, or you will see me there, Angel Rebel, the CEO Confidant. If you want to reach out to me directly, if you send me an email through the chat on LinkedIn, you will see me. I will respond to you, either someone in my team or myself. I will do that. And if you want to send me an email directly, again, I answer all the emails, absolutely all of them. My email address is very easy, angel@angelrebo.com. Rebo is my last name, and it's spelled like R-I-B as in boy, O. Angel@angelrebo.com.
Great. Okay, we have all that in the show notes. You mentioned LinkedIn, and you mentioned being active on LinkedIn, and for years I did LinkedIn the wrong way. Tell me how you use LinkedIn. It seems like it seems like you have a passion for it. It seems like you're into it. So tell me about LinkedIn. Tell me how you use LinkedIn.
Yeah, thank you. Well, the first thing I did, honestly, number one, everything I'm going to tell you is because I made a lot of mistakes, and I got my profile.
Good, you're going to save me. You're going to save me so much time.
And I got my profile restricted and suspended a few times. Okay,
oh wow, okay.
That's how many mistakes I made without knowing really what I was doing. Okay, yeah. So I learned the hard way. That's what I'm trying to say. So number one, and that will resonate with another part of our conversation today. Number one, be yourself, be natural. Mm-hmm. Every single day, I get literally 15 to 20 connections to requests to connect with me. And I get every single day hundreds of messages, literally, onto my profile because I have almost 27,000 connections. Mm. Guess what? 99% of the people that connect with me send me sequences of 3 or more emails inside LinkedIn, each of them of multi-pages.
Oh, wow.
Of multi-pages length. Mm. All right? So this is wrong. You know how long is a connection? Is a request to connect email from me to anybody I want to connect? 1 sentence. One. It's 1 sentence. Nothing else. So, again, imagine that you are in a networking event and you're reaching out to someone with a very simple question. You're not going to ask that person, hey, do you want to hire me? Why everybody is saying, sorry to get into your, sorry to bother you, sorry to blah, 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 blah. I was wondering if you would like to do. Come on. If you go to a networking event, face-to-face, to a country club or wherever you go, come on, give me a break. What are you going to say? Hey, hi, how are you? Whatever, right? Maybe you talk about the weather. Maybe you talk about the family. Maybe you talk about the last game from, I don't know, in our case, the Dallas Mavericks or the Cowboys, whatever that is, So why are you trying to fake it? Why are you trying to do something which is not normal, not natural? That's number one. Number two, post consistently. I post both business and and personal, all the time. And I can tell you, last year, for instance, from a personal perspective, the posts or the subject matters that I posted the most last year were number one, building bridges and reconnecting, and number two, give me a break. Give me a break. Were the two themes that I posted the most from a personal perspective. And then I use, as I have been posting consistently every single day, consistently for business and personal. Right now, I literally have hundreds and hundreds of people that over the period of a week interact with me. I mean, I have my engagement is very often very close to 10%, which is great. People that really say their word about what you are sharing.
Sure.
So that has allowed me to actually use my exposure and offer my exposure to other people. So I'm right now, literally, when I say LinkedIn strategist, I've been able to design strategies specific for both entrepreneurs and corporations so that they gain more exposure. And they use that additional exposure as an excuse to increase expansion. Again, everybody, that's why when you read my bio, it's I'm all about expansion and exposure, because they go hand to hand. And linking those two worlds of entrepreneurial, you said before, we entrepreneurs, we kind of live in our own world. I would say the other way around. Actually, I would say that corporate America lives in a different world, right? Because I have been able, those connections, this expertise I learned by being an entrepreneur on LinkedIn and use it for my clients' good and for my own good. I would have never learned it if I had stayed in corporate America. Impossible.
Yeah.
Impossible. Really impossible. And again, right now, I am the softest person reaching out to anybody. And that's probably why I'm successful, because I have genuine conversations with people, genuine conversations, real conversations of real people talking to each other about whatever that is,
Yeah. That's great. Thank you so much, 𝐤𝐨𝐳𝐲. It's been a real pleasure speaking with you. You can find out more about 𝐤𝐨𝐳𝐲 at the CEO Confidant, the CEOconfidant.com. That's the CEOconfidant.com. Find out more about his charitable foundation at wisdomforkids.today, wisdomforkids.today. You can reach out to Angel at Angel, ANGEL, at 𝐤𝐨𝐳𝐲, ANGELRIBO.com. Angel, it's been a privilege having you on today. Thanks so much for joining us. That'll do it.
Thank you.
Oh, the honor is ours. That'll do it for another episode of the Inside BS Show, folks. We will see you again right back here tomorrow for another edition of our show. We take you inside business strategy, share all the insider business secrets, and cut through all that inside BS that bogs you down. Until tomorrow, here's hoping you make a great living and live a great life.